The lights in the studio shone brightly, reflecting off the polished stage as cameras zoomed in. The tension in the air was palpable. Sitting at the center of it all was Barron Trump, poised, calm, and prepared. He adjusted his microphone with practiced ease, his expression unwavering. He wasn't here just as the son of a former president. Tonight, he was here to defend a legacy and define his own path. At just under 30, Barron was stepping into the ruthless world of politics, a world that had scrutinized his every move since childhood. Unlike the seasoned politicians and media personalities who had spent decades building their reputations, Barron had grown up under the glare of the public eye, watching his father's triumphs and battles unfold in real time. But tonight was different. Tonight, he wasn't just watching, he was stepping into the ring himself. Across from him sat Clara Hudson, a veteran journalist known for her tough interviews, razor-sharp questioning, and an unwavering ability to push even the most powerful figures into a corner. She had taken down senators, governors, and CEOs. And now, her target was Barron Trump. The network had billed the segment as the unmissable political showdown, and the hype wasn't just for ratings, it was real. Millions of Americans were tuning in, some curious, some skeptical, and others hoping to see Barron stumble under the weight of the questions. But Barron knew exactly what he was walking into. He had prepared for this. He wasn't here for theatrics, and he wasn't here to impress the media. He was here to make a statement, and he wasn't backing down. The moment Clara Hudson leaned forward, her eyes locking onto Barron Trump with laser focus, the entire studio seemed to tighten with anticipation. She was a seasoned journalist, known for tearing apart politicians with relentless questioning, and tonight, she was determined to put Barron in the hot seat. "Mr. Trump," she began, her voice sharp and calculated, "your father's administration faced heavy criticism for using emergency relief funds to assist migrants. These funds were meant for natural disaster victims, American citizens. Was it justified? And do you believe a future administration should follow that policy?" The question wasn't just a test, it was a trap. A setup designed to force Barron into a lose-lose scenario, defend his father and face backlash, or criticize him and alienate his supporters. But Barron didn't flinch. He leaned back slightly, his expression measured, then responded with calm precision. "It's easy to critique decisions when you're not the one making them," he said. "What my father faced at the border was an unprecedented crisis. The government had to act quickly, and while no decision is ever perfect, the priority was to secure the country and maintain order. This wasn't about luxury accommodations for migrants, it was about handling a humanitarian emergency responsibly." Clara raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "But Barron," she pressed, "these were taxpayer dollars, meant for victims of floods, fires, and hurricanes. Should disaster relief funds be used for immigration purposes?" Barron took a breath, his voice steady. "Americans are generous," he replied, "but they have limits. My father understood that securing the country isn't just about politics, it's about protecting public resources. If we had ignored the crisis, the damage to our infrastructure and economy would have been far greater. The real issue isn't whether my father acted, but why the current administration refuses to." Clara's expression tightened. She could feel the shift in power. Barron wasn't just holding his ground, he was redirecting the conversation. She tried again. "Critics say your father wasted taxpayer money on migrants while Americans in places like Ohio, Maui, and Afghanistan were left without aid. How do you justify that?" Barron's gaze sharpened. "You want to talk about leadership?" he said, leaning forward. "Then let's talk about why the current administration has failed to provide real solutions. Under my father, there was always a plan. Under this administration, we have disaster after disaster, without accountability." The crowd murmured. Barron wasn't just answering questions, he was taking control of the conversation. The air in the studio was thick with tension. Clara Hudson had come prepared to dismantle Barron Trump, to catch him off guard with tough questions, and to push him into a defensive position. But something unexpected was happening. Barron wasn't just holding his ground, he was dominating the conversation. Clara, still determined to regain control, leaned forward, her voice carrying an edge of frustration. "Barron, you keep shifting the conversation back to the current administration. But this is about your father's policies. You can't deflect forever. Answer the question, was it right for the Trump administration to allocate disaster relief funds for migrants while Americans were suffering?" Barron didn't blink. Instead, he met her gaze with quiet intensity, exuding the kind of calm confidence that made his opponents uneasy. "You keep asking the same question, Clara," he said smoothly, "so let me give you a clear answer. My father used the resources available to him to solve a national issue. And guess what? Back then, we didn't have a border crisis like we do today. So if anything, his actions proved that he was making the right call." Clara's smirk faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. The audience could sense it. The power dynamic was shifting. She had expected a young, inexperienced version of his father, one that she could push into a corner. Instead, Barron was commanding the moment, flipping her narrative on its head. Still, she wasn't ready to surrender. "You're still not answering directly," she countered, forcing a tight smile. "I've given you multiple chances, but you continue to evade the question. Why is that?" Barron leaned in slightly, his voice firm but composed. "No, Clara. I've answered the question. What I'm not doing is falling for the media's trap of reducing complex decisions into one-sided narratives." The tension in the room was now palpable. The audience, both in the studio and those watching at home, could feel the moment shifting. Clara Hudson, a journalist known for breaking politicians, was now on the defensive. She opened her mouth to respond, but Barron wasn't done. "Look," he continued, his voice calm yet unshakable, "you want a headline, but I'm here to talk about real leadership. Love him or hate him, my father didn't hesitate to make the tough calls. This administration, they waste time debating, while the country spirals into chaos." The audience murmured. Even those who had tuned in expecting to see Barron stumble had to admit, he was winning this exchange. Clara shifted in her chair, realizing she was running out of ways to trip him up. With a forced smile, she finally conceded, "I think we'll leave it there for today. Barron, thanks for your time." Barron simply nodded, rising from his seat. As he walked off the set, the weight of the moment settled in. This wasn't just a debate. This was Barron Trump proving he was ready for the political arena. As Barron Trump walked off the set, the studio buzzed with a strange mix of excitement and tension. The cameramen exchanged glances, the producers whispered among themselves, and even some of the most seasoned journalists in the room were still processing what had just happened. This wasn't the interview they had expected. The plan had been simple. Clara Hudson, a journalist known for putting high-profile figures on the defensive, was supposed to corner Barron with aggressive questioning, exposing him as inexperienced, unprepared, and merely a mouthpiece for his father. But Barron hadn't just survived the interview. He had won it. Within minutes of the segment airing, the internet erupted. The reaction, a nation divided. Social media platforms were flooded with clips of the debate, each side rushing to frame the moment to fit their own narrative. On conservative media, Barron was hailed as a new voice for America, the next generation of leadership, and a force to be reckoned with. His supporters pointed to his composure, his ability to dismantle the media's narrative, and his refusal to back down in the face of relentless questioning. On the other hand, left-leaning networks and political commentators scrambled to discredit him. They accused him of dodging the hardest questions, of repeating Trump-era talking points, and of avoiding specifics on key issues. "He's well rehearsed, I'll give him that," one analyst on a major news network scoffed. But he didn't actually answer the tough questions. He's just another version of his father, except younger and more polished. But for all the criticism, one thing was clear. Barron Trump was no longer just Donald Trump's son. He had stepped out of his father's shadow and into the political spotlight, on his own terms. Inside Trump Tower, a family's response. Back in Trump Tower, Barron sat in his office, scrolling through the endless flood of reactions. The interview was the #1 trending topic, and every major media outlet was dissecting his every word, his tone, and even his body language. His phone buzzed. A message from his father. "Donald Trump, you did great, son. Proud of you. Keep speaking the truth. Don't let them twist your words." A small smirk played on Barron's lips as he read the text. His father had always encouraged him to be bold, to take on the media, to fight for what he believed in. Tonight, he had done just that. Another message. This time from his mother, Isabella Trump. "Isabella Trump, I'm proud of you, my love. Stay focused. The media will try to twist your words, but you are smarter than them. Keep your head high." Her words carried a different weight. Unlike his father, who thrived on controversy, his mother had always been a voice of calm and strategy in his life. Her support reassured him that he was on the right path. But then came a third message. Senator Richard Monroe, a longtime Republican strategist. "Barron, I saw your interview. Impressive. But you've stirred the pot. The left is already attacking you, claiming you evaded questions. Be ready. They won't stop." Barron leaned back in his chair, letting the words sink in. He had expected pushback, but this was different. This was a declaration of war from the media and the political establishment. The strategy, what comes next? Barron wasn't naive. He had grown up watching his father battle the media, twist the narrative in his favor, and use controversy to strengthen his base. But he wasn't his father. He wasn't looking to win by shock value or aggressive rhetoric. He wanted to be known for his clear thinking, his ability to stay composed under pressure, and his strategic approach to politics. So, instead of reacting immediately, Barron did something unexpected. He waited. He watched as the media storm escalated, as commentators rehashed his words, as opponents tried to frame him as inexperienced and evasive. And then, when the moment was right, he made his next move. The following morning, Barron took to social media with a simple but powerful message. "Barron Trump, at Real Barron Trump. The media wants to twist the truth, but I'll tell you what no one else will. The policies my father put in place were designed to protect this country. We won't let the media or the left erase what's been accomplished. I'm not here to please anyone, I'm here to make sure America remains strong." The tweet exploded. Within an hour, it had been shared over 1 million times, with conservatives rallying behind him and critics furiously debating his words. It was the moment that changed everything. Barron Trump wasn't just defending his father's policies anymore. He was defending his own place in politics. The fallout, the birth of a political figure. That afternoon, he received another call. "Senator Monroe, Barron, you've got momentum. But listen, if you're serious about this, you need a strategy. The media will keep coming for you. They will paint you as just another Trump, a product of your father's machine. You need to show them you're your own man." Barron knew Monroe was right. He had entered the battlefield, and now he had a choice: fade into the background or step up and own his future. As he stared out over the skyline, the weight of the moment settled on his shoulders. The media wasn't going to let up. The left would continue to attack. The political world was watching his every move. But Barron wasn't intimidated. He was ready for the fight. Because this wasn't just about his father's legacy anymore. This was about carving out his own. The fallout from Barron Trump's CNN interview was far from over. If anything, it had only just begun. The media storm that followed was unlike anything he had experienced before. While he had spent his entire life under public scrutiny as the son of one of the most polarizing figures in American history, this was different. This time, he wasn't being talked about, he was the one leading the conversation. The battle of narratives. Every major news outlet dissected his words, spinning them to fit their respective agendas. Conservative media hailed him as the next rising star, a young man with the composure, confidence, and political instincts to shape the future of the Republican Party. They praised his ability to hold his ground, refusing to be manipulated by the media's agenda. Meanwhile, liberal pundits painted him as nothing more than an extension of his father, claiming he evaded the hard questions and was too rehearsed. Some even suggested that his performance was carefully staged, a calculated attempt to introduce him into the political mainstream. But amidst the noise, one thing was clear: Barron Trump had arrived. And people were paying attention. Inside Trump Tower, the next move. Barron sat in his office at Trump Tower, his phone buzzing non-stop. His inner circle, trusted advisors, political strategists, and longtime family allies, were all reaching out with advice, warnings, and encouragement. His father's text had been simple but powerful. "Donald Trump, you did great, son. Keep speaking the truth. Don't let them control the narrative." His mother, Isabella Trump, had sent him a message as well. "Isabella Trump, I'm so proud of you. Stay focused. The media will try to twist your words, but you know better. You always have." And then there was Senator Richard Monroe, one of the most influential conservative figures in the country. His message carried a different weight. "Monroe, you've stirred the pot, Barron. The left is coming after you hard. They see you as a threat now. Be ready." Barron exhaled, staring at the skyline outside his window. He knew Monroe was right. The shift from son to contender. For years, he had watched his father take on the media, battle political opponents, and navigate the brutal world of American politics. But he had never seen himself as part of that world, until now. This wasn't just about defending his father's policies anymore. This was about defining his own voice, his own path, his own political identity. His team gathered that afternoon for an emergency meeting. The question on everyone's mind wasn't whether Barron should continue to engage, but how he should shape his next move. The strategy: taking control of the narrative. Veteran strategist Jason Avery, who had worked with the Trump campaign during the 2016 election, was blunt. "Barron, you have the media's attention. Now you have to decide what to do with it. You can let them define you, or you can control the message yourself." Barron didn't hesitate. "I'm not going to let the media twist this into something it's not," he said. "If they want to put me in the spotlight, then I'll make sure they hear what I actually stand for." The plan was set. He wasn't going to rely on traditional media. He had seen firsthand how quickly they could turn on someone. Instead, he would take his message directly to the people. That evening, Barron sent out a message to his millions of followers on social media. "Barron Trump, at Real Barron Trump. The media wants to control the narrative, but the American people deserve the truth. My father's policies worked. Strong borders, strong economy, strong leadership. I won't apologize for standing by what's right. America comes first, always." The reaction was explosive. His post went viral, gaining millions of likes, shares, and comments within hours. Supporters flooded his replies with encouragement, while critics scrambled to counter his message. But Barron didn't stop there. He followed it up with a direct video message, bypassing traditional media altogether. Seated in his office, with the New York skyline behind him, he spoke directly to the camera. "For too long, we've let the media and political elites control the conversation. They tell us what to believe, what to fear, and who to trust. But the truth is, America is at a crossroads. We can either continue down the path of division, weakness, and failed policies, or we can fight for something better. My father fought for America. And now, I'm ready to do the same." It was the moment that solidified his transition from political bystander to political force. The response from Washington. The impact was immediate. Conservative lawmakers started reaching out, expressing their interest in working with him. Some even floated the idea of him joining key Republican initiatives. Liberal commentators escalated their attacks, claiming he was weaponizing his father's base and spreading misinformation. The White House, under President Adam Spencer, avoided commenting directly, but sources inside the administration confirmed that Barron's rising influence was becoming a concern. One evening, Senator Monroe called him directly. "Barron, I've seen a lot of young conservatives come and go. Most of them don't last because they don't understand the game. But you have something different. You have the name, the influence, and now, the message. But understand this, the media won't stop. They'll dig into everything you've ever said or done. Are you ready for that?" Barron didn't hesitate. "I'm ready. The future, a movement is born." What had started as a contentious interview on CNN had now become something bigger. Barron Trump had not only survived the political machine, he had harnessed it. His social media following exploded. Young conservatives, disillusioned with career politicians, began rallying behind him. Political strategists debated whether he was just a momentary phenomenon, or the future of the Republican Party. And in Washington, the establishment was starting to take him seriously. As Barron looked out over the city skyline, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about defending his father's legacy anymore. This was about creating his own. The world was watching. And he was ready. The political world was still reeling. What had started as a single interview had spiraled into something much larger. Barron Trump wasn't just making headlines, he was shaping them. The media had tried to paint him as inexperienced, as a privileged son riding on his father's coattails. Instead, he had emerged as a sharp, unflinching political voice, one that the establishment couldn't ignore. The tipping point, the media's relentless attacks. In the days following his viral moment, Barron Trump was the focus of every major news cycle. Panel after panel of political analysts debated his future, each side trying to define him before he could define himself. On one side, conservative commentators hailed him as the next great Republican leader, comparing his poise to that of Ronald Reagan in his ability to command attention to his father. On the other, liberal networks worked overtime to undermine his growing influence. They accused him of dodging real policy discussions, of leaning too heavily on his father's legacy, and of being nothing more than a political gimmick. But Barron knew the game. He had seen his father battle the media for years, and he understood one fundamental truth: it wasn't about winning their approval, it was about controlling the narrative. And so, he refused to play by their rules. The strategy shift, taking his message directly to the people. Instead of relying on television interviews or carefully staged press conferences, Barron turned to the one platform where he could speak directly to the American people: social media. His first move was a statement, short and to the point. "Barron Trump, at Real Barron Trump. The media will try to twist my words, but I will always stand for America first. Our borders, our economy, and our future matter more than political games. The establishment won't silence us." It was a declaration of independence, a message that made it clear he wasn't here to be a puppet for anyone. He was going to speak his truth, and whether the media liked it or not, the people were listening. The response was explosive. Within an hour, the post had been shared over 2 million times. Supporters flooded his feed with messages of encouragement, while critics scrambled to push back. The next move, Barron's first public address. The moment had arrived. His advisors had warned him that if he truly wanted to be taken seriously, he couldn't just engage in online debates, he had to step onto the stage. And so, he did. The event was held in Dallas, Texas, at a packed convention hall that had once hosted some of the most influential Republican rallies. Thousands had gathered, waving American flags, holding signs that read, "The future is now," and chanting his name. As Barron stepped onto the stage, the roar of the crowd was deafening. But instead of basking in the applause, he raised a hand for silence. He didn't want theatrics. He wanted them to listen. "I didn't come here to talk about myself," he began, his voice clear and steady. "I came here to talk about America, where we've been, where we're going, and how we can reclaim the strength that made us great." For the next 20 minutes, Barron laid out his vision. Border security: we cannot have a strong nation without strong borders. My father understood that. It's time for the rest of Washington to understand it too. Economic strength: America was built on hard work and innovation, not government handouts. We need leadership that empowers businesses, not burdens them. A new generation of leadership. Politics isn't about the past, it's about the future. The establishment wants you to believe that we are divided beyond repair. But I know this country is stronger than they think. His words were not just campaign rhetoric, they were a call to action. And the crowd felt it. The fallout: the political establishment takes notice. By the time Barron stepped off the stage, his speech was already being broadcast on every major network. Conservative outlets declared it a defining moment in Republican politics, while liberal commentators scrambled to dismiss it as empty populism. But the truth was undeniable. He was no longer just the son of Donald Trump. He was his own political force. The Washington reaction: a new contender in the arena. It didn't take long for Washington to take notice. Within days, Senator Richard Monroe called. "You did something big tonight, Barron," Monroe said, his voice carrying the weight of years in politics. "You've got the attention of some very powerful people. But listen to me carefully, this is where the real fight begins." Barron didn't hesitate. "I'm ready." "You better be," Monroe warned. "Because now, they're going to come for you harder than ever." And they did. The media went into overdrive, launching investigations into Barron's past, digging for any misstep that could be used against him. Old classmates, former teachers, even distant acquaintances were being interviewed in an attempt to find dirt. But unlike career politicians who crumbled under scrutiny, Barron didn't waver. He embraced the attacks, turning them into proof that the establishment feared him. The future: a movement is born. The political world had changed. What had started as a contentious interview had now evolved into something much larger. Young conservatives, frustrated with the establishment, flocked to Barron's cause. His name began appearing in polls for future elections, and political insiders started whispering about what his role in the Republican Party might become. And in Washington, behind closed doors, the conversations shifted. Is Barron Trump the future of the Republican Party? It was no longer a hypothetical question. It was a reality they had to prepare for. The final moment: Barron's choice. Late at night, back in Trump Tower, Barron stood by his office window, looking down at the city below. His phone buzzed with another text from his father. "Donald Trump, this is only the beginning. Stay strong." Barron didn't respond immediately. He took a deep breath, staring out into the city lights. For the first time, he truly understood what was ahead. He wasn't just making headlines anymore. He was shaping the future. And he was ready. The buzz surrounding Barron Trump had reached a fever pitch. The political establishment, the media elite, and even high-ranking government officials were all watching him now. What had started as a single contentious interview had evolved into a national movement, one that no one had anticipated. And Barron? He was just getting started. The aftermath: a nation reacts. Following his first major public address in Dallas, Texas, the impact was immediate. Across the country, political commentators, strategists, and everyday Americans were dissecting his words, trying to understand exactly what Barron Trump represented. Conservative America saw him as a fresh, young leader, a man with his father's resilience but a more polished and strategic approach. The establishment Republicans viewed him as a disruptor, someone who could potentially reshape the party's future. The liberal media worked overtime to brand him as an extension of Trumpism, warning that he was dangerous, calculated, and a threat to democracy. But beyond all the noise, the people were paying attention. Barron wasn't just another political figure emerging from the shadows of his father, he was becoming his own force, and that terrified those who had spent years trying to dismantle his family's influence. The White House responds. It didn't take long for the Spencer administration to take notice. At a press briefing, a reporter asked President Adam Spencer directly about Barron's growing popularity. "Mr. President, with Barron Trump gaining traction among conservative voters, do you see him as a legitimate political threat in the coming years?" Spencer smirked, shaking his head. "Listen, I think the American people are looking for real leadership, not recycled talking points. Young Mr. Trump has a long way to go before he's taken seriously." It was a dismissive response, but the underlying truth was clear: they were worried. Behind closed doors, the administration was already crafting a strategy to counter Barron's momentum. Advisors warned Spencer that ignoring him would be a mistake, that this wasn't just a passing moment in media cycles but the beginning of something much bigger. The media's escalation, the battle to define Barron. Realizing that Barron's rise couldn't be ignored, the media doubled down on their attacks. They scoured his past, looking for any scandal, any controversy that could be used against him. They interviewed former classmates, teachers, and acquaintances, hoping someone would provide a damaging story. They labeled him as dangerous, comparing him to political figures who had used populism to manipulate the masses. But Barron knew how the game was played. He refused to engage in petty back-and-forths with the media. Instead, he focused on one thing: taking his message directly to the American people. The next phase, a national tour. Advisors had urged him to stay low for a while, to avoid the storm and let things settle. But Barron had other plans. Instead of backing down, he announced a nationwide speaking tour, traveling to key battleground states, meeting with voters, and delivering speeches on economic revival, border security, and the future of American leadership. His first stop: Michigan. A state that had flipped back and forth between Republican and Democratic control, Michigan was a proving ground for any politician seeking national influence. Thousands showed up to hear him speak, waving American flags, chanting his name, and listening as he laid out his vision for the country's future. "Washington is broken," he told the crowd. "The politicians who claim to represent you don't care about your struggles. They care about power, about protecting their own interests. But I'm here to tell you, change is coming. A new era of leadership is on the horizon." The crowd erupted in applause. And just like that, a movement was born. The Republican Party's dilemma. As Barron's influence grew, the Republican establishment found itself in an unexpected crisis. On one side, there were traditional conservatives who believed the party needed to move away from the Trump era, distancing itself from the controversies of the past. On the other, a younger, more passionate base saw Barron as the future of the movement, a leader who could modernize conservative values while still fighting against political corruption and media bias. Behind closed doors, top Republican officials debated what to do. Should they embrace Barron, despite the risks? Should they try to control him, to mold him into a more predictable political figure? Or should they work to stop him before he became too powerful? The answer wasn't clear, but one thing was: Barron Trump was now a serious contender in American politics. A private call with Donald Trump. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Barron's phone rang. It was his father. "Son," Donald Trump's voice carried its usual strength. "You're doing something incredible. But you need to be ready for what comes next. They won't stop until they've destroyed you." Barron leaned back in his chair. "I know. They're going to come at you harder than they ever came at me," his father continued. "Because they know you're a bigger threat." Barron didn't waver. "Then let them come." A pause. Then, Donald Trump chuckled. "That's my boy." The decision, carving his own path. As the weeks passed, Barron continued his tour, speaking to thousands, building something bigger than just a name or a legacy. He wasn't trying to be his father. He wasn't trying to replicate the past. He was creating the future. And the political world was finally beginning to realize. This wasn't just about Trumpism. This was about the next chapter of American conservatism. The future, a nation watching. In Washington, journalists, politicians, and power players debated how far Barron would go. Some said he was just another media spectacle. Others believed he was the beginning of a new political dynasty. But those who had been in politics long enough to recognize a true shift in power knew one thing for sure. Barron Trump was no longer just an heir to a name. He was the next great political force in America. And the world was watching. The political landscape of America had changed, and Barron Trump was at the center of it. What had started as a single debate on GBN had turned into a nationwide movement. His name was no longer just attached to his father's legacy. Instead, it stood alone, representing something fresh, something powerful, something Washington wasn't ready for. From the moment he stepped onto the stage in Dallas, speaking to a sea of supporters hungry for leadership, it became clear, he was no longer just an observer in American politics. He was a contender. The political machine reacts, a threat to the establishment. Washington, once content to dismiss Barron as nothing more than the privileged son of a former president, was now in full panic mode. The Democratic Party saw him as an existential threat, a younger, more polished, and more disciplined version of his father with the ability to unite conservatives and appeal to younger voters. The Republican establishment didn't know what to do with him. Some saw him as the natural heir to Trumpism, while others feared he would disrupt the delicate balance of power within the party. The mainstream media launched an all-out assault, branding him as dangerous, radical, and a carefully crafted political product designed to manipulate the masses. But no amount of media spin or political maneuvering could stop what was happening. The people were listening. And that was more powerful than any headline or talking point. The tour that changed everything. Barron's nationwide speaking tour had begun as an experiment. His advisors were skeptical, warning him that traveling across the country, speaking directly to the people, could expose him to major risks. But Barron had a different perspective. He had grown up watching politicians hide behind scripted press conferences, avoid tough questions, and let media surrogates fight their battles. He refused to do the same. Instead, he went straight to the voters, holding rallies, town halls, and roundtable discussions with small business owners, veterans, and community leaders. His message was clear. Washington doesn't care about you. They care about power. But I'm not here to be part of the system, I'm here to change it. It wasn't just rhetoric. It was a declaration of war against the political elite. And it worked. From Michigan to Florida, from Arizona to Pennsylvania, his crowds grew larger, his support stronger. Young conservatives, working-class Americans, and frustrated independents started to see him as a real leader, not just a last name. The media dismissed it as a fluke. Then they called it a passing trend. Then, when the polls started shifting, they started to panic. Washington's response, the counterattack begins. The Spencer administration, under President Adam Spencer, could no longer ignore Barron's influence. Internal reports from the White House warned that his growing popularity wasn't just an internet phenomenon, it was real. So they did what the political machine always does, they launched an attack. Government officials began questioning his business dealings, suggesting he had benefited unfairly from his father's connections. The FBI announced a sudden review of his financial records, looking for any opportunity to weaken his image. A New York Times exposé painted him as dangerously ambitious, warning that he could become even more of a populist threat than his father. Barron expected it. He had seen his father go through it all before. The difference? This time, he was ready. Barron fights back, the power of direct messaging. Instead of waiting for the media to frame the story, Barron went straight to his own audience. His response was swift and devastating. He released a 4-minute video directly addressing the attacks, looking straight into the camera, his voice calm but firm. "They want you to believe I'm the problem," he said. "Because they don't want you to focus on the real issue, how Washington has failed you." The video was shared tens of millions of times. More importantly, it shifted the conversation. Instead of being on defense, he was back in control. The media had spent years crafting narratives, trying to dictate who was electable and who wasn't. Barron shattered that system overnight. The Republican Civil War, the party's future at stake. As Barron's movement grew, the Republican Party faced an identity crisis. The old guard, made up of career politicians and corporate donors, saw him as a threat to their influence. They wanted to reclaim the party from the populist energy that Trump had ignited. But Barron's supporters? They didn't want to go back to the old days of the Republican Party. They wanted a fighter. A leader. A movement. And Barron Trump was delivering. In closed-door meetings, Republican strategists debated. Should they embrace him? Ride the wave of his popularity and try to shape him into a more traditional candidate? Should they fight him? Risk alienating their base by trying to block his rise? Or should they step aside? Accept that the party's future was no longer in their hands? For the first time in decades, the party's establishment wasn't in control. Barron Trump was. A call from Donald Trump, the moment of decision. Late one night, Barron's phone rang. "Donald Trump, son, you've done something incredible. But now, you have to make a decision." Barron leaned forward, listening carefully. "Donald Trump, do you want to keep shaking things up from the outside? Or do you want to step into the arena for real?" Barron didn't respond right away. He stared out over the Manhattan skyline, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just about speeches. Or rallies. Or social media. This was about the next step. Then, after a long pause, Barron finally spoke. "I'm ready." Donald Trump chuckled. "That's what I wanted to hear." The announcement that shook America. The next morning, Barron took to the podium in Nashville, Tennessee, in front of 50,000 supporters. As the crowd erupted in chants, he raised a hand for silence. Then, looking out over the largest gathering of his career, he made the announcement that would change American politics forever. "For too long, Washington has ignored you. For too long, they've put their own interests ahead of yours. That ends now. I'm not here to talk about problems, I'm here to fix them. And that's why, today, I'm officially launching my campaign to take this fight to Washington." The crowd exploded. The media went into a frenzy. And the political world realized something chilling. Barron Trump wasn't just a political voice anymore. He was a movement. And Washington was out of time. The announcement sent shockwaves across America. For months, Barron Trump had been teasing a potential run, but no one, not the media, not the political establishment, not even Washington's most seasoned strategists, had truly believed he would take the plunge. But now, there was no doubt. He wasn't just talking about change. He was stepping into the ring to make it happen. The media frenzy, a campaign unlike any other. The response from the political and media elite was immediate. Every major news network ran breaking news banners announcing Barron Trump's entry into politics. The headlines ranged from shocked to skeptical to outright hostile. The New York Times, Trump 2.0. Barron Trump officially enters the political arena. CNN, a dangerous legacy, Barron Trump's campaign could reshape American politics. Fox News, Barron Trump's historic run, the next generation of conservative leadership. The Atlantic, Populism Reborn, how Barron Trump plans to finish what his father started. Political commentators scrambled to define him. Was he simply riding his father's influence, or was he building something entirely new? Was he the continuation of Trumpism, or was he the evolution of a movement? The White House quickly issued a statement, dismissing Barron's campaign as a sideshow that won't be taken seriously. But behind the scenes, President Adam Spencer's team was panicking. Washington's panic, the establishment's worst nightmare. It wasn't just Democrats who were worried, it was Republicans, too. For decades, the party had been controlled by career politicians, corporate donors, and Washington insiders. Even during Donald Trump's presidency, there had been an ongoing power struggle between the Republican establishment and the new wave of populist conservatives that Trump had energized. Now, Barron was forcing that divide wide open. Would the Republican leadership embrace him, or would they try to shut him down? Would they attempt to control his rise, or would they risk letting him take over the party entirely? Inside closed-door meetings, Senate Majority Leader Robert Kensington spoke bluntly to his colleagues. If we don't figure out how to handle Barron Trump, he's going to rewrite the party in his image. And if that happens, we lose control. The establishment had a choice. Fight him, risking alienating millions of young conservatives who were flocking to Barron's cause. Support him, risking a total shift in the party's direction, one that couldn't be undone. Either way, the old guard was running out of options. The first rally, the movement takes shape. 1 week after his announcement, Barron Trump held his first official campaign rally in Phoenix, Arizona. Over 75,000 people showed up. It was historic. Political analysts compared the crowd to some of the largest rallies in modern American history. The sheer number of attendees, many of them young, working class, and passionate, shattered the narrative that Barron was just an extension of his father. This wasn't about Trump's past. This was about America's future. As Barron stepped onto the stage, the roar of the crowd was deafening. But instead of waiting for the applause to die down, he immediately took control. They said I wouldn't do it, he began, his voice clear and unwavering. They said I was too young, too inexperienced, too much like my father. But let me tell you something. Washington is scared. The crowd erupted. The speech that defined his vision. For 45 minutes, Barron laid out his vision for America. He spoke with clarity, with conviction, with an intensity that even his critics couldn't ignore. Key points from his speech. Restoring American strength. Our nation is at a crossroads. We can continue down the path of weakness, division, and government control, or we can fight for something better. Border security. We are either a country with laws, or we're not a country at all. No more open borders. No more excuses. The economy. Inflation is destroying the middle class. We need policies that put American workers first, not foreign interests, not career politicians. A new era of leadership. The establishment wants you to believe that the only people who can lead are those who have spent decades in Washington. But I say, why should we trust the same people who created these problems to fix them? The audience hung on to every word. But then, Barron did something no one expected. The challenge to the political elite. As he neared the end of his speech, Barron turned his focus directly on Washington's power structure. I have a message for every career politician, every lobbyist, every corrupt insider who has sold out this country for personal gain. A pause. The crowd went silent in anticipation. Your time is up. The stadium erupted. The video clip of that moment went viral, spreading across social media like wildfire. Within 24 hours, it had been viewed over 100 million times. It became the defining moment of his campaign launch. The fallout, a political earthquake. After the rally, Washington insiders scrambled to respond. The White House dismissed Barron's speech as populist nonsense, but behind the scenes, internal polling showed his approval among independents was skyrocketing. The Republican establishment held emergency meetings, debating whether to embrace him or fight him. The media launched a new wave of attacks, claiming his campaign was fueled by misinformation and conspiracy theories. But none of it worked. Barron had tapped into something real. The personal side, a conversation with his father. That night, back at Trump Tower, Barron received a call from his father. Donald Trump's voice was filled with pride. "You did it, son." Barron smiled. "It's only the beginning. You know they're going to come at you harder than ever now." Barron didn't hesitate. "Let them." A pause. Then, Donald Trump laughed. "That's exactly what I'd say. The future, the battle for America's soul." As Barron Trump's campaign took shape, one thing became clear: this was bigger than politics. It wasn't about Republican versus Democrat. It wasn't about left versus right. It was about the people versus the establishment. And for the first time in decades, Washington wasn't in control. Barron Trump was. And the world was watching. Because this wasn't just about an election. It was about a revolution. The crowd stood in absolute silence, hanging on to every word as Barron Trump stepped to the edge of the stage, microphone in hand. His eyes scanned the sea of faces, young and old, workers and business owners, veterans and students, people from every walk of life. These were not just voters. These were Americans who had felt unheard, dismissed, and left behind. He took a deep breath, his voice steady, his conviction unwavering. "This is bigger than me. Bigger than my last name. This is about America. The America that built skyscrapers, that sent men to the moon, that created the greatest economy the world has ever seen. The America that stands tall in the face of adversity, that protects its people, that believes in hard work, family, and faith." The crowd erupted in applause, but Barron raised a hand, not to silence them, but to focus them. But today, that America is slipping away. The people in power, the career politicians, the lobbyists, the media elites, they don't care about you. They care about themselves. They tell you they have solutions, but all they do is make promises they never intend to keep. They divide us. They tell us we're too different to stand together. They weaken our economy, they weaken our borders, and they weaken our future. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Then, his voice grew stronger. "But I refuse to accept that. I refuse to stand by and watch this great nation be destroyed by people who put their own interests ahead of yours. I refuse to let America be anything less than what it was meant to be, a country of opportunity, of safety, of strength." The crowd roared, chants of "USA! USA!" shaking the very foundation of the arena. Barron let them chant, but then, he brought them back. "This is not about politics. This is about the future. Your future. Your children's future. The future of this country that we love. It's time for leadership that isn't afraid to stand up to Washington, to the corrupt establishment, to the people who think they own this nation. They don't. You do." The people in the audience nodded, some even wiping away tears. This wasn't just a speech. This was a movement. Barron stepped forward, gripping the microphone tighter. His voice was filled with determination, with certainty, with fire. "I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent. If you love this country, if you believe in its greatness, if you believe that we deserve better, then stand with me. Because together, we are going to take America back. We are going to rebuild our economy, secure our borders, bring jobs back to American workers, and restore the values that made this country great." Another thunderous ovation, but this time, it was different. It wasn't just applause. It was a promise. As he looked out at the crowd, Barron knew this was more than a campaign. It was a revolution.